Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to the show. As you can tell, we are joined today by a very special guest indeed. You may know him best as Junior Hubbard from Friday the 13th, Part 5, as well as his role in the movie 13 Fanboy. Today, we are joined by Ron Sloan. Ron, how are you today?
Well, they hurt me, Sam. They hurt me. I'm doing good, man. How are you?
I am doing fantastic. It's such an honor and a privilege to have you on the show today. And I can't wait to get to talk to you about sort of your career, especially your role sort of in Friday the 13th, Part 5. We've had a few guests out from that show, so I'm really interested to hear your perspective as well as 13 Fanboy, which I personally love that movie.
Oh, good. Thank you. And there's a new one, but we'll hit that one later.
Oh, awesome. So with every guest, the first thing I like to do is to talk to them kind of about their first start in the industry. So how did you kind of first start in acting?
Well, that's a good question. I actually was a page at a TV studio for Norman Lear. He did all the shows like All in the Family, Different Strokes, Facts of Life, 8 different shows. And I actually kind of got my break there with just little parts every now and then. It was called Special Business. So
Uh,
it was like being an extra, but you get to interact with a star. So you got double pay, you got residuals, and that's how it all started. Through the help of Norman Lear, I did an improv with him one night before the taping of All in the Family, and I got to play Meathead. And so we clicked, hit it off, and he said, "Go see my casting director, Jane Murray, and tell her I sent you." And after that, I started getting like under 5, which meant under 5 lines. And then I got to do a pilot, and it just started slowly gaining momentum.
awesome. Did you ever do any kind of theatre or stage work?
Yeah. Oh boy. Yeah. You probably won't know this actor, but there's always a slight possibility. But in the 70s, long before you were born, Sam, um, as a matter of fact, your parents probably didn't even think about you yet. Um, uh, there was an actor named Will Geer. Will
Yeah.
Geer was on a TV series called Walton's Mountain, like a backcountry taking place in the South, in a sense. So he had a Shakespearean repertory company. Yes, this boy did Shakespeare for 3 years, which was wonderful. And as we know, Shakespeare is very difficult. It's a language unto itself. And when I first auditioned for Will, um, he was telling everybody what parts they get to play, and I think we were doing Merry Wives of Windsor, I think it was that time. And so I'm like, everybody called him Pop. So I'm like, well, Pop, what do I get to play? And he goes, Ralph. I go, Ralph? I don't remember reading Ralph. He goes, oh no, Ralph's the guy that takes out the garbage here. And until you know Shakespeare, that's what you're going to be doing. And I actually bought a Shakespearean dictionary, and I looked up every word that I had to speak, and it was great. Took it from there.
You
Was,
know, I obviously I've never personally done any kind of theatre work, but every time I speak to people, anyone that's done it, to me, there's nothing more terrifying. I can't comprehend how people can go out on stage to a live crowd night after night after night. I just to me that's like the most
no,
daunting thing ever.
yeah, no, you're correct. Because when I was I think I was 13 years old, 14 years old, I was in high school, and I, I I was to play Falstaff, pretty rough at 14 years old. And I was in a Shakespearean contest at UCLA University of California, Los Angeles. And I actually made it through the very first round, and my acting teacher was like thrilled. And I got up on stage and saw 5,000 people in that audience. And I totally went blank. Every actor's nightmare, but not just blank. This guy improvised. You don't improvise Shakespeare, especially when you don't even know what the hell you're talking about. I went from hero to zero in a heartbeat. Needless to say, I did not make it to the second round. But yeah, theater was wonderful. It was a lot of fun. But yeah, I personally, I do not need to do that ever again. I I I have that similar fear of, not remembering the line. Uh but it's not even that, sometimes other actors don't memorize or remember their lines.
Mhm.
And you're like, okay, so I got a tap dance here, and how do I save you?
Yeah.
And then you look bad or you look good. So no, I prefer film and TV.
Yeah, absolutely. To me, and that's the thing. One of the guests, I always ask them kind of the question about whether they feel more at home doing screen work or theatre work. And like, it's funny how when I get to kind of speak to people that um like absolutely love theatre work, the idea of improv, the idea of forgetting lines is almost something that they kind of like thrive off. And I'm like, to me, I'm just like, that's just like a nightmare. How can you
It is
thrive
a
off being in a
nightmare.
bad situation?
I mean, when I was doing theater in the old days, I mean, I would actually rehearse in my dreams. True story. I would be like, I swear, I'd be like in my bed on the stage, and they'd be going, "Come on, Ron, get up, get up." And I mean, I'd be rehearsing, and I mean, that was just too much. That's
Mhm.
like, oh my God, I'm a space cadet. It was not good. The beauty of film or TV is it is forgiving. I mean, if you really mess something up, more than likely you get to do it again.
Yeah.
But you try not to mess things up. The burning film or tape, uh, people aren't happy. There's still production costs. You try to do the best you can.
Yeah. I mean, it's just a different element of pressure, I suppose. But I guess it's
There's
like
a
you
lot
said,
of
it's a
pressure.
bit more forgiving.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of pressure. I mean, even auditions. Oh my God, auditions. There's a tremendous amount of pressure. Yesterday I got sent sides for a TV show, and it's 7 pages, and it's due. You had 24 hours, and you're supposed to have an accent, and you're supposed to. And I mean, I'm like, oh my God. Okay, but let's just give this our best shot. If it works, it works. No harm, no foul. You just give it your all. And it's a challenge. You feel like you accomplished something, but you never hear back. If you don't get it, you don't
Mhm.
find out, why didn't I get it? You
Mhm.
know, it could be not even your acting at all. It could be, oh, he's too old, too tall, too short. Would he shave? It's like crazy stuff.
Um, so growing up, what was your kind of did you kind of have any go-to genres that you watched, or did you watch any sort of horror, or what was kind of your favorites growing up?
Well, it's interesting. I'm the youngest in my family, so having two older brothers, my middle brother liked to terrify me. He would like to scare me and pulled some pretty lousy crap to do it. Um, my older brother, no, he was a scientist. I mean, he was into science right from the start. So I got into sci-fi with him. My middle brother, we kind of watched stuff old, like the old Frankenstein movies, and Bela Lugosi as Dracula, those movies, and then the comedies, Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, or The Three Stooges, or um, it really, I didn't follow. I was more into sci-fi type horror, if that makes any sense, because I always believe that stuff could happen, and that's really terrifying. It wasn't until probably the early 80s, like the first Friday the 13th, of course, Halloween, Nightmare on, always the first ones. And then it's like, oh man, oh yeah, that was scary shit. I just, okay, I don't need to see any more of this, but it was a thrill. It really wasn't until I was cast in Friday the 13th Part 5, but it wasn't called that. I don't know if you know this, it was called Repetition. Nobody in the movie, or almost nobody, most of the cast, I'll say, because I'm sure maybe John Shepard or Melanie Kinnaman knew that they were in a Friday the 13th, but the rest of us didn't. And it wasn't until we were on the set, and Tom Morga, who played Jason, the stuntman who played Jason, walked onto the set and looked at every single one of us in full costume, and we're like, "Oh my God, we're in a Friday the 13th!" And I mean, our lives have changed forever because of that.
Yeah. So was that the original name? Was that kind of a cover up, or was that genuinely what the movie was going to be?
No, it was a cover up. See, those movies were so popular that people would try to get onto the sets of the making of the movies,
right,
and crash the sets and all that. So no, none of us knew. And once we did know, it even was a tighter set. I mean, I was telling my friends, "Oh man, you got to get me on." I did get my best friend on. I told the producers he was my brother and visiting from out of town, would it be okay? And we were both pretty much about the same size, looked a little bit alike, so I could pull it off. And yeah, it was cool, man. It was very cool.
I guess we'll kind of jump into it then with Friday the 13th Part 5. As you said before, you played Junior Hubbard. So for you, what was your audition process like?
Well, it wasn't normal. I was very fortunate. I used to do what's called showcases. I would do a 5-minute scene at a little theater in Hollywood, the Fountain Theater. And I did it about once a week. And I did it religiously for a couple of years. And sometimes there'd be casting people, sometimes there'd be producers, directors, agents. That was real important. And so one night I'm doing this very heavy dramatic scene. I can't even remember what it was from. And Pamela Basker and Fern Champion were the casting directors on Friday the 13th, and they were there. And after I did that scene, they asked me, "Can you play a hillbilly?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, give me a moment here." And I thought of a friend of my brother's who was the goofiest guy I ever met. And I mean, this guy just talking to him, you feel like you'd have to scratch yourself. This guy was creepy and just crazy. So I kind of took him, threw in me in a little dialect, and they were laughing. They were just busting a gut. And after that evening, they came up to me and they said, "We'd like you to come down to our office tomorrow and pick up sides for a movie called Repetition. And you're going to play Junior." Great. I'm all excited, and I go down, I get the sides, come back home, and it was like perfect, man. I'm just trying to work things out. And I go to the audition, I believe it was the next day, and director Danny Steinman's there. And so someone's reading off camera to me Ethel's lines, of all things. Carol Locatell, may she rest in peace. And Danny's laughing his ass off, man. And he's all, takes me aside and he goes, "Hey, I'm really going to love working with you." Oh my God, in my mind, does that mean I got the part? Is this it? I got it. And Fern and Pamela kind of reeled me back in and said, "Tomorrow you have a callback for Frank Mancuso Jr." He was with Paramount Studios. And it's like, okay, geez. So I come back in the next day, and Danny's there, and Frank and a few other people. And as I walk in, Danny's all, "Hey, Frank, I'm really gonna love working with this kid." And again, your mind's like, "Oh my God," and reel it in. And I auditioned, and he laughed. Everybody's cracking up, and I got the part. And that started my whole horror film career.
That's awesome. I always love hearing different audition stories because they are so varied and so wild. But again, it's kind of goes back to, if you weren't kind of putting yourself out there at the very beginning, you never know what could have happened. So it
You
kind of
have to
shows you
make
have
it.
to.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, you have to make it work. I mean, it's not like who was it in the 40s, I think it was, Lana Turner was working at Schwab's restaurant in Hollywood and was a waitress, and there was a producer there. And no, man, you just work your craft, and I'm very fortunate, man. That was a blessing.
Yeah.
I booked a film shortly after that called Bonsai Runner with Dean Stockwell, and wore some of the same clothes from they were my clothes from Friday the 13th. And then I did a TV series, an episode of Tales of the Dark Side. George Romero, Tales of the Dark Side is called The Serpent's Tooth. And that was cool. I died 3 times in 1 year. And it drove my parents crazy. I'd come home, I go, "Mom, Dad, I got the part. My mom goes, "You died, don't you?" It just became a thing.
Do you have any fond memories whilst being on set of Friday the 13th?
Oh yeah, no, great memories. I mean, first of all, just being with Carol Locatell, who played Ethel. She passed away a few months back, and you know, um, we had so much laughter. We just had fun with those roles. We cracked ourselves up, and also Miguel Nunez. Like Miguel and I, he was cool, man. I would see Miguel, uh, Mark Vittorini, a couple of the other guys, Rick Mancini, who played the mayor. I worked at a casting facility shooting screen tests for commercials. And all those guys auditioned for me. So when they saw me on the set, it was like, "Hey, what are you doing here?" And we already had that relationship. So that was cool. So yeah, it was a family. It was a family right from the start.
Oh, that's
So that's
awesome.
it. It still is.
Mhm.
Once you're in a horror family, you can't get rid of your relatives unless you kill them. So.
It's so true. And again, like I imagine it must be an amazing opportunity because with a lot of the convention scene, and the convention scene being so big now, way more than it was sort of even 10 years ago. It must be quite nice to get to do these kind of reunions and get to re-meet sort of your castmates and the people you worked with.
Well, that's the fun part. I mean, that's part of the fun part of doing the conventions is you get to see a lot of your old friends. You get to see people like this last convention I just did was really, I was there for the release of my new film called Dylan's New Nightmare, which I'll go into later. But directly across from me was Dick Warlock.
Mhm.
Dick Warlock was the stunt coordinator for Friday the 13th, Part 5, and I hadn't seen him since 1985. But Dick Warlock was teaching me and John Shepard how to stage fight. So our fight scene in front of the motel.
Mhm.
Well, in training, Dick connected and knocked me on the ground. I saw double. I mean, I was really basically knocked out. And I was like, oh my God. And then John ends up doing exactly the same thing and actually connects. I'm down on the ground. So I told Dick, I go, hey man, I gotta tell you, you knocked me out in Friday the 13th, Part 5. And he's like, I never hit anybody. I've never. And he was like defending himself. He's like 85 years old, I'm just goofing around with him and go, it's okay. It's okay. You're a great teacher because John Shepard did everything you did and he knocked me out too. So the head you see in the background here is the head from Friday the 13th, Part 5. Well, it's sitting on my table at the convention, and Dick walks up to the head and he's all, did I really hit you? I go, yeah, you did. He goes, I should hit you again. And he was like kidding around. So cool. So that was sweet. That was really sweet.
See, obviously you speak about some stunts. Did you have any issues or any sort of difficulties with any sort of stunts you had to do?
Well, there's one scene where I'm riding the motorcycle and screaming right before my good old decapitation. Spoiler alert. Yeah, I lost my head. Oh, there it is. No. So they strapped a big heavy camera because back in those days they didn't have little hero cameras or
Yeah.
whatever, They took a full-size camera and it's strapped, it was film. And they strapped it, to the handlebars of my Yamaha 250 Enduro. And I mean, that's real heavy. Try to steer
Mm.
and I'm supposed to be riding and screaming, and still thinking about what you're doing. And Danny Steinman, the director, said to me, he goes, kid, you drop this bike and you're really going to die in this movie. I mean, he was like, he goes, that's a $50,000 kid. I mean, more pressure. So, there was like a scene or two with that, and it's heavy. You go to stop, and when I stop, I had to do what's called a film reversal, where I go from screaming to a normal look, and then they reverse the film so it looks like I'm normal and then screaming. And they had me in a harness to like jerk me back and all sorts of crap. So they realized, after a couple of takes like that, they go, you know what? And they towed me in on a rope. So, and then set a mark so they could get it exact where the bike's going to stop, and I do everything. But yeah, that was a little pressure.
Little, I was going to say that sounds way more pressure than we're talking about stage work before.
Well, just doing the film, they made me, before shooting, first of all, they asked if you could ride a motorcycle, and I could. But then they took me out dirt bike riding through like avocado orchards and orange orchards out in Camarillo, California, just to make sure I could ride. A little late if I couldn't. Oh my God, what were they going to do? So that was cool.
Yeah, awesome. So when the movie kind of was finished and it got released to the general public for the first time, do you kind of remember kind of the general essence of the reaction of the movie?
Well, yeah, it was wonderful. We were at UCLA Westwood, Westwood Village, big theater. I mean, it was like a real red carpet type scenario. It was so cool. And, with every scream, every laugh, Carol and I got a lot of laughter, and that was so rewarding because we were the comic relief. I mean, to this day, I mean, yes, Miguel Nunez was funny in what he did. But I mean, deep down, belly laughing is Carol and I. And it was cool just hearing all that. It's kind of scary. I mean, I was a big boy back then. I was tipping 245 pounds, I'm like 175 now. So, seeing yourself big on a screen like that, you're really big.
Mhm.
And actually, I had this is kind of funny. I had a blind date that night, and she kept on like looking at me and like, what? Looking at the screen, looking at me. We went out to dinner afterwards, the whole cast, and just watching me eat. It's almost like she's expecting to see Junior with slop dripping out of his mouth. It was like, okay, there was no second date after that.
Um, obviously, a lot of people. I don't know if it was kind of the same maybe when it got released, but obviously a big talking point of Friday the 13th Part 5, which is deemed as, I guess, controversial to some people, is that sort of really that it's Jason Voorhees isn't really kind of prominent in the movie. Um, you know, for me personally, I love that kind of about Part 5 is that it gives you kind of like a refresher. It gives you almost like a palate cleanser in a way. It just gives you something different apart the franchise. What's your kind of opinions on people that have these thoughts about Part 5 simply because Jason's not the prominent character?
Well, initially, I mean, I got kind of bashed. Part 5 got bashed. Everybody got bashed. You're in a copycat killer movie and blah, 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 blah. And for me, I didn't care. Are you kidding? I'm a working actor in a Friday the 13th. Oh my God, it doesn't get any better than that. Boo
Right.
hoo, boo hoo. If you can't handle it, don't watch it. You know? And then as time progressed, what's beauty about Part 5 is it could really happen. It's not a mythical monster, it's not Freddy, it's not Michael, it's not real Jason.
Hmm.
It's some spun ambulance driver who is creating he's this serial killer. So to me, that's almost more frightening, that oh God, this could really happen. Also, if you think about the very beginning, you had the real Jason coming out of the grave with Corey Feldman, Tommy Jarvis, um, screaming and going nuts. He was supposed to be playing Tommy Jarvis in the film, but he had Goonies going on at the time, and it was a conflict. So John Shepard, very fortunate, very good actor. John was into his character even off the set. I mean, and then we ended up doing a movie together, Bonsai Runner. And we didn't have roles together. It would have been cool if we did, but it's
Yeah.
funny we're both in the same film. That's
Yeah,
pretty
no, that's
cool.
awesome. No, and again, I always kind of refer back to people with Part 5 is Part 1 never had Jason either. Like the very first Friday the 13th movie, like which is a lot of people argue is one of their favorites because it kickstarts the whole franchise. Jason's not in that movie other than the very last couple of seconds. So if anything, this Part 5 is probably closer to the original than the rest of them are. So
It's
I
true.
always find that odd.
Yeah, I think it's all settled down somewhat now. I mean,
Yeah.
every now and then I'll see a comment negative about Part 5, but I would say 95% of true Friday the 13th franchise followers love that movie.
Hmm.
And it's interesting when you go to a convention. I mean, they want you to do quotes from the film, and they know my lines. I've had people come to the convention dressed like Junior. That's a little bizarre. I mean, they got their leather flight caps. I've signed leather flight caps. It's bizarre. You're like going, oh my God, man, this is crazy.
So
It's an
actually,
honor too.
yeah, no, that's something I actually was wanted to kind of ask you about was what was your reaction when they said that you're going to be wearing that infamous leather flight cap?
Oh, it was fine, it was actually it wasn't bad because it was pretty cold out when we were shooting,
Mm.
you know. And I'm on the motorcycle anyway. I thought it was all part of the whole wardrobe. The dirty cut up sweatshirt and bib overalls underneath and the boots and everything. And I worked on the show, at least I was on set for 3 weeks. Actual real working days was probably 6 days out of that 3 weeks. But it's cool, man. It's it's playtime, it's fun, you look at it's not Shakespeare, but it's actually in some respects harder. It's hard to be funny.
Yeah.
Anybody, you can do a dramatic role, and I'm not knocking it, trust me. I love doing drama, but it's very difficult to be funny. Your timing, that whole pace, the person you're working with, um, you got your hands full. I was very blessed to have Carol.
No, I totally agree with you. I think I don't believe there's in kind of acting or any performance really either. I don't think there's anything really harder than comedy, because it's so the timing has to be so like perfect and precise, and
Yeah.
again it's especially in like a horror setting. Like if you're in a horror setting, to then try and bring comedy to it must have been a real challenge for you.
Well, you can't think of what's going on around you. You got to remember, this is you. This is your life. I am Junior. Carol is Ethel. We are who we are. This is our relationship, mother and son, and we're a little twisted. I'm more twisted than Carol. Carol, she was a rock, man. She was, her mouth was like a sailor, and we had the freedom from the director to try different things, and
Oh,
some
cool.
things stuck. It wasn't all written word. We got to improvise and have some fun, and we cracked ourselves up.
Was there any scenes that you filmed, maybe even in particular, that you remember that didn't make the final cut?
In this movie, actually, not really. No, everything we did was storyboarded out. I mean, we did different verbiage, different ideas. Oh, try it this way, try it that way. It's okay if I flip you off. That's Carol. Is that all right? Yeah, go ahead, give it a shot. No, everything. I was not upset in any way, shape, or form that anything got cut out. I've experienced it, but that's the director's and producer's prerogative. The only thing, yes, there is one scene, looking back. Initially, when I got decapitated, I got to see, I was doing voiceover work. It's called ADR. And I'm screaming. So they needed to match screaming with what's going on, and then the screaming coming silent. And here I got to see a daily of my head being cut off and hitting the ground and rolling on the ground, rolling. And when it stopped, it looked right up at camera. I mean, it was freaky. It's scary. And I didn't know that in the final cut, they just showed it hitting the ground. That's it. Well, the censors took it out, because back in those days, everything had to pass censorship.
Yeah.
So, I even said something to Danny years later. I was like, hey, man, I hope you have like all that footage. I would love to have that for my reel. And he goes, Paramount made me destroy it. It doesn't exist. And he goes, my heart's broken. He goes, man, I had great footage. We could totally recut this film. So, oh well.
I
But
mean, it's one thing whether they want certain things in and out of the movie. I mean, I've interviewed Deborah Voorhees as well. And I remember she kind of said a similar thing where with her death scene in Friday the 13th, and that the original what was actually shot and what was supposed to be in the film was what was claimed to then be too violent and gory, that they kind of made it cut out and really sensitized it to, well, what we kind of finally saw in the movie. Um,
Yeah.
I kind of understand I suppose their perception on not wanting things in a movie, but you could just keep the footage, right? Like you could just become like a DVD release or something. I hate that
And
they
they
make it
weren't
just,
thinking back then. They didn't. I don't know
yeah,
why. I don't know why, and that's the sad part of that
yeah,
movie for me. Because I mean, there was some pure great scenes, great stuff.
of
You know,
course. It's always going to happen, I suppose, in this kind of industry, right?
absolutely.
Um, Another role I really want to talk to you about is 13 Fanboy.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
you know, when like I first kind of heard this movie through Deborah naturally, and speaking to her and just her sheer passion for this project alone, like was enticing enough to kind of go watch it. And obviously, it's such an incredible cast. Obviously, with yourself included. What was that kind of like for you when you first got approached to be a part of this movie?
Well, it was interesting because Deborah and I have been friends. Uh, we weren't close during the filming of Part Five. I mean, we were cordial. We knew each other. We talked.
Yeah.
But, I knew Miguel. I knew Mark Vittorini. I knew these guys, so that was a different relationship. John Robert Dixon and I were friends back then. He was also auditioning for me all the time, and so we were like, "Man, we're in the film together." It was a cool. Deborah and I became close as we started doing conventions together and start to know each other. And over this, oh my God, probably a 15-year period, roughly, we were at a convention in Ohio, Whorehound Weekend, and she's pretty healthy girl. She likes to go for walks and get up cardio, that sort of thing. So she said to me, "You want to go for a walk?" And I was like, "Well, sure," right before the convention. And I'm thinking, a walk. I'm not thinking got to get my 13,000 steps in. Um, so we went for this long ass walk, and during the walk, she said to me, she goes, "I wrote a part in a film for you, a small part. I'd be honored if you'd play it." And I didn't ask like what the role is or anything. Well, sure. What actor's going to turn down work, first of all, but I mean, this is a friend.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Well, it was a year and a half later, I get a script emailed to me, and I'm on like 26 pages of a 97-page script. I'm like, well, this isn't a small part. I called Deborah. I go, I got the script, and I'm not complaining. But it's used to a small part, and this is a wonderful role. And she goes, well, the more I got to know you, the bigger your part got.
Yeah.
So that was cool. Now, in retrospect, but you asked about if there are scenes you regret being cut out. Yes, in 13 Fanboy, I had a handful of wonderful, loving scenes with Dee Wallace. We have a funny scene in bed together. No sex or anything. It was just warm fuzzies. We've had problems in the film. Uh, so if you want to see that scene, it's on my IMDb page, on my demo reel. There's a couple scenes that were cut out. One with Carol Locatell and myself. Um, it's just an extended version of the convention scene, but Carol gets a little raunchy. So those are cool. And then, of course, there's the trailer to 13 Fanboy on my IMDb page.
Mhm.
So, that'd be cool. You guys type in Ron Sloan on IMDb and you'll be in for a treat.
Yeah. It's one of those movies where, it's sad as well because obviously the premise of the movie, which was obviously about a stalker for the franchise 13 Fanboy. I know there's a lot of women from that franchise. Obviously, I'm assuming there will be others as well for outside of Friday, where they were actually having stalker issues. So it's kind of like it's kind of like a double-edged sword in a way for us, because I hate the concept that they were struggling at that time with stalkers, but at the same time, to use it in a way to have a really amazing story being told um, through the movie. I think it was really well done, and I think your work in there was fantastic.
Oh, thank you. I was very, for the lack of a better term, blessed for being able to work with Dee Wallace. By far, I mean, an amazing pro, amazing woman, amazing soul, and an amazing friend. I mean, our relationship clicked. It worked. You know, just like Carol and my relationship worked.
Mhm.
This worked in a different sense, that even on our time off, we decided to hang out together and do stuff. I mean, it was cool. And I have nothing but respect for her and her acting ability. And she had a tough role, man. She gut wrenching tough. Amazing.
Yeah, that's something I wanted to ask you about. What is it to work with someone so iconic? Like not even just in horror, but just in, I mean, just her accolades alone in the industry. What it was like to kind of get to work so closely with her.
Well, think of graduation day. You've worked so hard, and so far, this was the tip of the iceberg for me. Working with Dee truly makes you work better. It takes you to that next level that you strive for. It actually wasn't work, if that makes any sense. To me, a lot of times work is something you don't want to do. Oh God, I gotta go to work. You hear that all the time. I could understand. I would have loved to have had a TV series, or uh, just an ongoing. This was so wonderful. I didn't want to leave the family. I didn't want to go home. I was having so much fun, and it was so rewarding. Deborah was awesome to work with. Um, and she had a wonderful cinematographer, Ben Meredith. And it's interesting because I even developed a relationship with Vince DeSante. I won't do a spoiler alert for 13 Fanboy because if somebody hadn't seen it, but Vince is involved in the movie, and now he's a producer and director and writer. He does all the Never Hike Alone, Never Hike in the Snow. He's just completed Never Hike Alone 2. But he's the producer on my new movie, Dylan's New Nightmare, with Miko Hughes. And yeah, Miko, the little boy on Pet Cemetery. And he was also
Yeah.
in The New Nightmare on Elm Street. It was like 12 years ago or something. Well, he's all grown up, and he's a hell of a good actor.
Oh, that's awesome.
I have a wonderful scene with him. Wonderful scene. And yeah, I can't wait for you guys to see it. It's supposed to be on YouTube either the end of this month or within the couple weeks in September. So it'll be free on YouTube. And it's
Oh
called
wow.
Dylan's New Nightmare. And yeah, it's the start of everything all over again. Yes, it is.
Is so with Dylan's New Nightmare, is there I imagine, I'm sure there's certain things you obviously can't tell us about, but is there anything you can kind of tell us
Oh,
about the movie?
absolutely. Absolutely. Um, Dave McCrae is an actor from Canada, and he plays Freddy Krueger in the film. And he is an amazing Freddy. and he was in full costume. We did it at Mad Monster Party. We did the screening of it at Mad Monster for about an audience of 200 people, and it was a tremendous hit. And it's only 30 minutes long. It's a fan film, but they got Ben Meredith from 13 Fanboy to be the DP, and Vince DeSante is the producer, Cecil Laird the director, and I mean he's really good. And the magic happened. Miko and I just had pretty good time together, and without going too much in depth, there is blood in this film. There is some blood in this film. You always want to donate blood, but never in a horror film. There is a trailer. If you go on YouTube, Dylan's New Nightmare, there's a couple of trailers. I would click on the most recent to get a good flavor of what's going on.
For sure.
I play a little bit different character than I normally play.
Oh, awesome.
So another side of Junior.
Awesome. No, what I'll definitely make sure I link the trailer at the top of the description, so anyone that wants to watch the trailer could just check the description and the link will be there.
That'd be wonderful.
And will you be doing any sort of posts or anything on your social media when the movie comes out?
Yeah, I mean, I will share a link. It'll be all posted between Miko and I'm sure it'll be on like Instagram and Facebook, and I'm not a huge social media guy. It's just because I need to be, but I need guidance here. I'm lucky enough to do the Zoom phone call, but yeah, no, there'll be a link to YouTube, and there's a couple, like I mentioned, a couple of trailers on there right now, and it's still part of an Indiegogo scenario, raising funds. And what's nice is they have an hour and a half of behind the scenes footage, and I saw some of it, and well, I don't they're gonna put together something with it. It's a riot. It's damn good.
Yeah, the behind the scenes footage always does well.
And I think there's a sequel in the near future, and I'm already committed to it.
Oh, this is awesome. I'm really excited to see this. What I'll do as well is once I find whenever it goes live, whether it's in a few weeks or the end of the month, on socials, I'll also share links and post it so people can also go and make sure you have to check it out. We have to make sure we support these sort of the fan-made films as well, just as important.
This is a good one. This, eventually, and if he hasn't already, Robert Englund's gonna be retiring.
I think he has just recently retired.
Yeah. And Dave McCrae, Robert Englund was at the last convention we were at, screening. I don't think he was at the screening. I have no idea if he was sitting in the background or took a peek, but Dave McCrae did a hell of a job, and he was in full costume at the screening, and that was pretty wild. Nora Hewitt, who came in first place on Face Off TV series, did the special effects. She was the special effects artist on 13 Fanboy along with Meg Wilbur. When she did the special effects, she put Freddy together again, so to speak. So the whole nightmare scene happens again, man. It happens again. And I'm very fortunate I get to be part of a nightmare.
And and one of the things with these conventions that I love what you said about how 13 Fanboy kind of came around for you was with these conventions, for me, they're always about making fans of this genre sort of come close together, and so many people become friends just at these conventions. So that's really awesome to kind of hear how even the guests that are appearing also kind of bond together the more they get to spend time with as well.
No, it's really true. It's like, sharing a meal. I think an interesting one was Carol Locatell, myself. Her husband would always come to most conventions with her. And it turned out her husband's great friends with Nick Castle. Nick was the first Michael Myers, and I mean, he's amazing director, so many shows, written, directed, you name it. The guy's an icon. And so we're done with the convention. Kara goes, "Oh, Nick and I and Greg are going out to dinner. You want to join us?" Well, hell yeah. And I'm sitting there, and there's that side of you that goes, "Oh, I want to ask him about this, and I want to ask him about that." And there's that other side, you go, "Keep your mouth shut, just enjoy the moment, part of everything." And that's what this side won.
Yeah.
I didn't, didn't go there in any way, shape, or form. I know Nick had seen part 5 because he's great friends with Carol, so I was a tag along. It was a nice experience. That sort of stuff, nice experience. Hanging out with some of the different actors, whether it's grabbing a quick meal and just talking story, it's wonderful. It's fun. And some of them you do bond with. There's a couple of guys that I know when I see again at a convention, a couple I've talked on the phone after the conventions, and invite them over and stuff like that. So that's cool.
Oh, that's awesome. Do you have any funny or standout moments whilst being at a convention?
Funny moments at a convention would be to get attention. Carol and I would jump into character of Junior and Ethel. And I'd yell at the top of my lungs, "They hurt me, Ma, I tell you, they hurt me." And she's all, "You shut the fuck up, you big dildo." And people are cracking. And they loved it. They loved it.
If you had any advice for people, it doesn't have to be to break in the industry, but just any general piece of advice for people listening, what would that be?
Believe. Believe in yourself. Believe in what you can do. You do know your limits, but push it. You know what we think we can't do, we really can do. So if you just follow your heart and give it your all, I'm not saying you're not going to fail. I mean, you can audition 100 times and get nothing, or you could audition your very first time and get the role. The main thing is that in which we love, we become masters of. And I didn't make that up. I can't remember who taught me that, but it's like that movie. I know you've probably seen it, and there's a book, The Secret. See, believe, receive. Manifest it, but be careful what you ask for. You got to be you really have to ask clearly what you want. It's not just, "Oh, give me a starring role in a film." No, be specific. What do you want? What would just be so awesome for you right now? And what do you have to do to get it? Things as a young actor or an old actor, you still have to work for it. You still do. It's not like someone's going to hand it to you. You're only as good as your last role. For years, everybody saw me as Junior, so of course, the next 3 movies, I was Junior. I was some hillbilly boy. I was some desert rat. I was some, football player, beer drinking, that kind of stuff. Well, it's interesting what roles I get to look at now and hopefully get to do in the near future.
I think a lot of us, especially myself, we are super excited to see kind of what's coming up in the future for you.
I'm excited. I mean, from your lips to God's ears. I spent 17 years in Maui, which is going through, oh my God, such hard times. My heart is broken.
Yeah.
My friends lost their homes. Where I used to work, the gallery is gone. Everything gone. Unreal. I still have one friend I haven't heard from. But I took myself out of acting for those 17 years. I got back in a sense through conventions. It was like 20 years ago. I was asked to do a convention in Texas. I didn't even know about them. I really didn't. I was like, wow, you guys, well, yeah. Well, it was sort of a bust. It wasn't a good convention. And I wasn't going to do any more. But then my agent, Sean Clark from Convention All Stars, said, hey, man, try this other one. It's called, Mad Monster Party in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. And I'm like, okay. And it was a hit. I mean, oh my God, I had so much fun. And Carol and I was like, I'd do this every weekend if I could. And I still feel the same way. They're not disappointing. The fans are amazing. The cosplayers, oh my God. And the things I've signed guitars, canoes, Crystal Lake canoe, Crystal Lake sign, machetes, masks, of course, blue and red, I mean, just crazy stuff. The big, thick book I call the Bible, the Crystal Lake Memories book. Yeah. It's a trip. It's a trip.
Ron, I want to thank you so much for taking time out of your day to speak to us. It's been an absolute blast to get to talk to you.
Well, thank you, man. And you better go to bed because it's like after 4 a.m. your time.
It's 4:10, but it's I think my body clock started to adapt now to like Pacific time, Central time, Eastern
That's
time.
funny.
So I'm just adapting to it now.
Well, thank you so much. And I truly appreciate you and your show, man. And what's nice is you're a pro. I love the way you ask questions. I like your show a lot. And everybody should definitely tune into Sam's Universe here.
Thank you so much.
You're good, man. You do your homework. You're good.